This is how America was stolen, episode 23. When unity slowed expansion, the colonies changed tactics. Episode 23 begins with a shift that would define the next century. The use of peace not as reconciliation, but as strategy. Violence had limits, war was expensive. Fear disrupted trade, and united native nations were harder to crush outright. So the colonies reached for something more effective than guns. They reached for treaties. Colonial officials spoke the language of fairness. They promised protection, trade, coexistence. They offered papers stamped with seals, written in languages many native leaders could not read. But these documents were never meant to be honored. They were designed to divide. Treaties were negotiated with individual tribes instead of confederacies. Leaders were pressured to sign quickly. Boundaries were drawn on maps that ignored migration routes, sacred sites, and seasonal cycles. What settlers called compromise was actually surrender, broken into pieces small enough to accept. Some native leaders signed out of desperation. They saw famine approaching, they saw villages already burned. They hoped that partial loss might spare their people from total destruction. Others refused, and were immediately labeled enemies. Colonial forces used these refusals as justification for violence, claiming that peaceful tribes were being threatened by hostile ones. The lie worked. Once a treaty was signed, settlers ignored it almost immediately. Encroachments followed. Settlers crossed borders. Farms spread, forests fell. When native nations protested, colonial officials claimed misunderstandings, translation errors, or changed circumstances. Paper erased accountability. The colonies had discovered something terrifying. They could steal land without firing a shot, and still claim moral superiority. This strategy fractured native unity. Some tribes believed treaties could work. Others knew they were traps. Distrust grew between nations. Confederacies weakened. The very unity that had slowed expansion began to unravel. That was the goal. Violence returned when needed. Treaty violations were enforced with military force. Tribes accused of breaking peace were punished, even when they were defending land guaranteed to them on paper. Resistance became criminalized. Survival became defiance. Episode 23 reveals one of the most devastating truths of American expansion. Genocide didn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wore ink. By presenting theft as legality, the colonies trained future governments to hide violence behind law. This pattern would be repeated again and again, through land acts, removals, and reservations. The blueprint was complete. But even now, not all native nations surrendered to the illusion of peace. Some leaders saw through the lies, some refused to sign. Some prepared for a different kind of war, one that would reshape the continent. In episode 24, we meet those leaders, figures who refused treaties and chose resistance no matter the cost.